C'est quoi la question? C'est quoi la question? C'est quoi la question? C'est quoi la question? Avec qui tu cantes, qui tu cantes, qui tu cantes.
This is the story of the wild gray parrots. It is a story of a place in Africa where the wildlife still congregate by the thousands. It is a story of how animals relate to and even create their own environments. It is a story of social and cultural traditions among highly intelligent animals. It is also a sad story of the use and abuse of wild animals and the exploitation of wildlife in developing countries. We hope that you'll help us end this sad chapter and secure the future of these amazing wild birds. We all know the African gray. It's the parrot with a remarkable ability to mimic virtually any sound in its environment. Indeed, of the hundreds of parrots in the world, the gray is the only parrot known to mimic other birds and mammals in the wild. But it turns out that it's more than just mimicry. Dr. Pepperberg's experiments with the famous Alex have demonstrated that the intelligence of the African gray parrot is on par with that of the great apes, the dolphins, and even human toddlers.
How many? 2. That's right. Can you tell me what's different?
Color.
That's right. What color bigger?
Shape.
No, what color bigger? What color bigger?
Green.
Green is right. Good boy.
Grays are also one of the most common pet parrots. Many of these birds are still being trapped in the wild and shipped to Europe and Asia for sale in the pet trade. The numbers are quite staggering. From 1995 through 1999, about 175,000 wild-caught African gray parrots were legally traded. Although no one knows the exact number in captivity, these trade figures suggest that there may be well over 1 million grays in cages around the world. But where did all these birds come from, and how do they live in the wild? The gray parrot, which is known to science as Psittacus erythicus, occurs naturally only in Africa, specifically in the rainforests of Central Africa. In 1995, a student of Dr. Pepperberg's by the name of Diana May traveled to the Congo Basin and launched the first scientific study of wild African gray behavior. One of many sites like this in Central Africa, these clearings attract a wide variety of wildlife species, including large ungulates such as the bongo, the sidatunga, forest buffalo, and a number of bird species such as these Hartlaub ducks. But the animals with the overwhelming physical presence are the forest elephants. In some cases, over 2,500 individual elephants have been identified as visitors of just one clearing. Amazingly, these clearings were apparently created by the elephants themselves. The idea being that enough elephant traffic in a wet area, with all their tree-eating, massive clomping around and hole-digging, quickly turns the place into an open and swampy clearing. Most of these animals have one thing in common. They eat primarily leaves and fruits, and they travel great distances to visit clearings, to eat soil, to drink water, and in some cases to eat special aquatic plants that grow only here in the clearings. But it was the smaller gray animals with brilliant crimson tails that drew Diana to this site, the African gray parrot, to be exact. And they come by the thousands, landing, walking, and hopping along the ground. These parrots are after the same water and soil and aquatic plants, which are available only in the clearings. On a typical day, the grays arrive early in the morning and congregate in the trees around the perimeter of the clearing. It's a rather noisy assembly, because the more grays that arrive and join the group, the louder it gets, until eventually the gathering becomes thunderous. After a large number have assembled, say anywhere from 50 to 100 birds, the grays will slowly make their way to the ground to forage. Typically, an individual remains on the ground for only a few minutes before flying back up to the safety of the trees. This relay can go on for a couple of hours, but most often they forage in the clearing for only about an hour. But greys remain at the clearing for most of the morning, and sometimes they forage on the ground past noon, before heading off into the rainforest, where they forage on fruits, seeds, and flowers, and basically get back to being a proper parrot. When a hawk eagle appears soaring high over the clearing, the group foraging on the ground will burst into flight, not to return to the ground for an hour or more. So if these places are so frightening to the birds, it raises the obvious question: what is so great about these areas? Why fly for miles and miles just to come here? Clearly, there must be something valuable about these sites, where the animals wouldn't expend so much energy and time getting here. Although the details vary from place to place, the big attraction appears to be some combination of the minerals available, such as sodium and calcium, as well as the properties of the soil itself. Of course, eating minerals can offset a diet that is deficient, sort of like taking a mineral supplement, so that part is easily understood. But the clay story is a little more complicated. Clays are remarkable because they can act like chemical sponges in the digestive tract of animals, where they can soak up toxins in the animals' diets. So it turns out that foraging at the clearings may enable the parrots, the elephants, and the other animals to live on foods that are inadequate in terms of essential minerals, as well as laden with toxic chemicals. Soil eating by birds and by mammals is actually common all over the world. In fact, a very close parallel to these clearings in Africa occurs in South America. Here in Peru, the similarly sized Amazon parrots and their kin, these are mealy Amazons, consume clay at a riverbank in Manu National Park. The ecological parallels of the sites in Africa and Peru are quite striking, although the cast of characters in each case is different. In the Neotropics, the visitors include these macaws, tapirs, and in rare cases even spider monkeys. So we have a sense for what the benefits might be, and they apparently outweigh the risks of the hawks and eagles. But there must be some other drawbacks as well. All these animals visiting one site for extended periods must also make the clearings good places to pick up diseases and parasites, much as concentrations of humans have done throughout history. But perhaps more importantly, the concentrations of wildlife must also attract mammalian predators as well. In this case, mostly predators of the human kind. Although hunting of large mammals has been common at many clearings, and presumably has been so throughout history, the really lucrative strategy is to catch parrots alive and export them to foreign countries. The demand for African greys as pets in developed countries is a powerful market force that reaches all the way back to the forests of Africa, where locals are well aware of the money they can make by catching and selling wild parrots. They of course have no idea how this process works. They simply know that they can sell the birds for good money in the nearest town. That's all they need to know to make this work. The trappers start early in the morning, selecting a site where the birds have descended before. They place their traps out in the middle of the clearing, they camouflage them well, and they bait them using two different strategies. The first is to use live gray parrots as callers or living decoys. These are usually birds that have been captured here previously, possibly even the day before. Some are placed in trees, and these are called appelons, or caller birds. Since most parrots have a healthy fear of coming to the ground, Most of them wait for another bird to perch low in the trees before they take the risk to descend. By placing the appellant low in the trees, the trappers encourage the wild birds to come to the trapping site and to move close to the ground. Once they're there, they encounter the second strategy. They see the decoy birds that are placed on the ground directly in front of the traps. The trapping sites are supplemented with special plants that the birds are after. So the wild birds arrive, they see the tether birds, and lo and behold, there are parrots there already on the ground, feasting on the tasty treats. The trappers hide in a blind they've built nearby out of local materials, well camouflaged with palm fronds and other vegetation. From here they can watch the birds arrive and trigger the traps at just the right moment to catch as many birds as possible in each trap. They'll have just this one chance to catch the birds on any given day, so the timing is critical. The whole setup with the blind, the traps, and the decoy birds is all riding on this one moment. Once the birds get up their nerve to land on the ground, they immediately begin to eat plants and soil and to drink the water. And of course, the more that arrive, the more attractive the site becomes to all the other greys in the area. They are nervous though. Maybe some have been near the trappers' blinds before, and they remember their near capture experience. The whole flock bursts into flight several times at the slightest provocation. Once the trap is sprung, the trappers enter the trap itself and transfer the birds into large boxes. The birds are then consolidated into a single box for shipping. Birds are often kept in camp in large cages for weeks while more parrots are captured. The greys are then transported by car on rudimentary roads for about 2 to 4 days to get to the exporting city, and from there they are generally flown to Europe and Asia. As many as half of the birds die between capture and the city of export. Trapping and export of greys is still legal from many African countries. In the case of Cameroon, the quota is currently 12,000 birds per year. Although it's natural to find these images disturbing and to feel that the trappers should be stopped, it's worth bearing in mind where the demand for these birds comes from, the people who desire the birds as pets. We in the developed countries are the ones who are ultimately responsible for creating the incentive for the trappers. If Africans didn't have a market where they could sell these birds, they simply wouldn't trap them in the first place. What can you do to help? We can think of 3 ways that you can help save the wild greys. The director of the newly established national park in Cameroon, Dr. Leonard Usongo, has submitted a proposal to the World Parrot Trust for support of his anti-poaching work. This site, called Lobeke National Park, is supposedly protected, but Dr. Usongo lacks adequate funds to protect the gray parrots from poachers. He estimates that about 15,000 birds are still trapped here each year, despite his best efforts to protect them. About half of these die between the wild and the exporting city. The trust has pledged $6,000 this year to help pay for his anti-poaching guards, but Usongo needs many times this to completely shut down the parrot poaching in the reserve. All donations to the Trust's African Grey Conservation Fund will be allocated to this effort. The second way you can help is to seriously consider visiting one of these spectacular sites as an ecotourist. As many of you have visited parrot sites in South America know, tourism can be a powerful force for conservation because it protects wildlife and it creates jobs for local people at the same time. We at the Trust are working hard to establish a trip to this very clearing, which will be safe enough and spectacular enough for ecotourists. The third way you can help is to support our campaign to ban the importation of all wild-caught parrots into the European Union. While we would like to shut down the trade in wild-caught birds everywhere, right now the most feasible way to move forward is to work on this issue country by country, region by region. A similar effort was successful in the US in the early 1990s, something called the Wild Bird Conservation Act. If we can get similar laws passed in Europe, we'll cut the demand for wild-caught birds in half. That would save many tens of thousands of these beautiful creatures in their natural habitat each year. Please visit our website and sign the wild-caught bird petition. What we're working towards is a future where all of these animals can live in the wild without fear of being captured and without suffering the horrible and dangerous experience of exportation, only to live out their lives in a small cage. For the cost of dinner and a movie, your donation will help save 10 or more of these fabulous wild birds. And working together through the Gray Conservation Fund, we can save tens of thousands of wild grays each year. On behalf of the World Parrot Trust, thank you for taking the time to learn about gray parrots flying free in Africa, and for doing what you can to help them stay wild.
Africa, 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 go, 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 Africa, man, fair for